Okay, we are live. Good morning, good morning, good morning. You are tuned into a special edition of the Black Westchester Power Hour with AJ Woodson and Damon K. Jones. This is part 3, I believe it's like part 3 in the series we've been doing on the Mount Vernon Police Department's tapes. We have an investigative reporter, George Joseph of the Gothamist and NYC, WNYC, who has been doing an incredible job and been very diligent in staying on it, uncovering a lot of the corruption in the Mount Vernon Police Department. He first broke the story of the whistleblower officer who tried to go to his superiors and they retaliated against him and they didn't believe him, so he started making some tapes and went to the DA, did everything he was supposed to do, and eventually he went to the press. And George Joseph has broke the story. And Damon, I'm going to let you introduce the next two guests.
Okay, first up, it's my brother, man, Dr. Damon Brown, man. He's a brother, former police officer. He has written many papers on police reform, addressing the issues of racism in police department. And brother's latest piece is we're going to put it in the thread is in Police Chief magazine, policing in multicultural communities. And I'm glad to have this brother on because what we're going to be talking about, I think he could give some great insight. And my other brother, from Greenburgh, Woodlands, went to school with this brother, and he's doing great work he's a local defense attorney. He lives in Mount Vernon. Brother Peter St. Davis, he's been very outspoken on issues in the community and addressing the criminal justice system and how it relates to people of color and poor people. And he's a great lawyer, man, and he doesn't allow the BS when he's defending his clients, man. So I thank you both for coming on at this time.
That's what's up. That's what's up. I'm gonna turn it over to George real quick. I want you to just speak a little bit about the series of tapes. When I put this up, I'll put links to the previous shows. But for people that are just watching for the first time, they don't know anything about the tapes, give us a little kind of run through on how we got here and what brought you to the story. Sure. And do you have some of the clips lined up from my Twitter, just in case I reference them and you want to play them, or how do you want to do that? I gotta do that.
Okay, so I'll start and then you just interrupt me whenever you want, okay?
Okay.
Well, thank you both for having me. I appreciate coming on blackwestchester.com. I just want to start by saying you guys have to support your local news. For these enterprise stories to come out and for the local community to know, people have to support their local news. I'm not just talking about my own site. I'm also talking about blackwestchester.com. The economy is tough right now, but without this kind of local news, corruption festers, misconduct festers. No one knows about it. It stays in the dark. And so I think what blackwestchester.com has been doing, what our site Gotham has been doing, is really important in communities. So I just wanted to start with that. So thank you guys for your work.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I came to this story because I knew the whistleblower officer, Bevell's attorney. I just happened to be covering something about a law called 50A, which was at that point being fought over in terms of a repeal about police secrecy records. I ran into him at a rally about that. At the time, he was running for DA of the Queens District Attorney's race down in the city. And he mentioned, I have this crazy story up in Mount Vernon, this cop dealing with some crazy stuff. And I was like, okay, whatever. But I kept in touch with him. I saw that Officer Bevell had previously sued the city, and I read his complaint, and my jaw hit the floor. Because in this complaint, he was already back in 2015 claiming that his fellow officers were stealing from residents, assaulting people in custody. This is not stuff that police officers normally put down on paper publicly. And I was shocked at how little attention and follow-up investigation had gotten. So I knew this is something special. Let me keep looking at this. And so we started doing some stories about Officer Bevell. he had taped his superiors calling him a rat and basically retaliating against him for some of the activism he had been doing. That was our first story. Then I kept going on that beat, looking at some of the officers Officer Bavell accused. We got some confidential internal affairs documents from the Mount Vernon Police Department, which showed that oftentimes when civilians would complain to the police department about some of these officers that Bavell had accused, their direct supervisors were doing the initial investigations and constantly dismissing complaints. Some of these were serious complaints of stealing thousands of dollars from a deli, complaints of taking money from a suspect, sexually violent strip searches, anal assaults, that kind of stuff. All of it being dismissed. I didn't even know at the time that Officer Bavell had recorded hours and hours of phone calls with his colleagues that illustrated some of these very allegations. But the officers in these calls were saying, I witnessed X, Y, and Z at this block, so-and-so doing it, assaulting someone in cuffs, stealing from someone, planting drugs on someone, falsifying search warrants. All this stuff, really painting a picture of a corrupt narcotics unit. And what happened was Officer Bavell had been trying to work within the system. He had talked to his supervisors, filed complaints earlier in his lawsuit. He had also gone to the district attorney's office, the Westchester County District Attorney's Office, and given them hours and hours of his tapes. He thought that they were going to investigate. What did they do? We don't exactly know what steps they took, but we do know that they continued to keep prosecuting people who had been accused by the very officers named for misconduct in the tapes without disclosing the tapes. So sending people to prison, sitting on this evidence, and apparently not doing much about it. So our first story was looking into what the DA did and examining allegations of Mount Vernon residents and other residents in Westchester County who had allegedly been framed. That was our first story. Allegations of fabricated evidence, falsified search warrants, undercover officers identifying the wrong people on purpose following undercover drug buys. Then our second story looked at another aspect of corruption, which is officers alleging that the narcotics unit was working with favored CIs, not just allowing them to buy drugs with pre-marked buy money and busting someone to go up to a bigger target. No, allowing drug dealers to continue selling in exchange for help nabbing and racking up arrests of low-level users, and in some cases, safeguarding drugs for them, allowing them to operate with impunity, control territory, that kind of thing. And that case, that story, which was our second story in the series about the Mount Vernon tapes, included an officer saying he himself had done this. Not, oh, I saw so-and-so do this. I put crack in my shoe for this CI and gave him back the crack after we processed him with a DAT ticket. So that was very important because at the time, the Westchester DA's race was going on, and the incumbent DA, Anthony Scarpino, had brushed off all this information as saying, oh, it's hearsay. We can't do anything about this. We looked into this. Well, here's a tape of a guy speaking in first person and making an admission against self-interest about what he himself had done. And yet it appeared that they didn't really try very hard to investigate. That's what he was criticized for during the election. This third story that we did in the series, which just came out this week, is looking at allegations of rampant brutality and sexual abuse by these same narcotics officers. We have multiple officers referring to incidents of civilians being assaulted in the police station, in some cases in handcuffs, as well as illegal strip searches being done. But not only do we have the tapes, we also got video of some of these accused officers doing strip searches and anal cavity inspections in an apartment, which is in direct violation of police rules, Mount Vernon police rules, longstanding police rules that say that you can only do frisks in the field. If you're going to do a more serious search, you need to bring in the arrestee, and then with the supervisor's permission, strip search them at a secured, hygienic, private police facility. But in these videos, these same accused officers in the tapes are doing these searches, these very graphic, some would argue humiliating searches in an apartment, right on video. We have the video. And the question is, at this point, with this video, these rules that they clearly broke, is the police department going to do anything about this? And I don't know the answer to that. That's something for the people in Mount Vernon to figure out. So that's where we are. AJ, if you want to play some of the clips from this latest story, maybe I can contextualize them.
All right, I'm going to attempt to do this. Yeah, 'cause I so miss the studio when everything's just lined up. I push a button here. Share
So
share.
the first video in my tweet was the video itself. And if you want to, you can go into just the part where you hear the guy saying, like, come on, man, I don't have anything, or something like that. I think that's like at minute 1 or something like that.
Okay, well, here's the video
Yeah.
that was taken. Everybody can see that on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if they can hear it.
No, can't hear it.
Can't hear it?
No.
Why not?
I think if you turn up your computer volume and the volume in the video, maybe we'll hear it.
All right, that is up. Let's try that again. Can you hear it now?
Nothing.
My volume is all the way up.
I think it must be something with Zoom. Maybe you should just play it on a separate device or play the other clips.
Okay, so let's get 1 second. That didn't work. Trying to get this off my screen.
I heard something.
That was me.
Oh.
I was gonna say I heard something too.
You want me to try playing it like from here?
Yeah, we might have to do it like we did before.
Okay. So I'm just going to a little part of the video where you can hear an individual who's being strip searched in an apartment sort of expressing distress about it. Even though, as I said, police rules say that these searches are supposed to happen in a police facility.
We're going to search warrant for the premise and everybody in it. We're going to search before we do. Do you have any drugs or weapons on it? All right. Camera's going to run for you guys.
Right at your feet, squat and cough.
I'll be right back.
So that's the audio of one of these strip searches, and there were multiple done that day. This next clip is of Officer John Campo, who's still active on the force, describing a detective named Camilo Antonini, who he alleges assaulted a 67-year-old man who was suspected of flushing heroin down a toilet, even though the man was in cuffs at this point, allegedly.
Officer John Campo was on the phone with a colleague, complaining about a search warrant raid that had gone wrong. He didn't know his colleague, Murche Bavel, a police whistleblower, was reporting.
You know, these are the tiny, the old tiny, the search warrant at this house. So we hit the door, because I knew toilet, flushes all the heroin down the toilet, right? So you come up with nothing. Right now I'm on a sale anyway.
He said that wasn't enough for one of the officers on scene, Detective Camilo Antonini, who they call Nini.
God, this guy's a 70-year-old white dude, man. He is smacking the living out of this dude in front of Fagan. I'm talking about like not a little smack. I'm talking about cocking back and smacking this dude so hard that he's losing his breath and can't breathe.
After 5 brutal minutes, he says, their supervisor, Sergeant Sean Fagan, stepped in.
Fagan was like, yo, Nini, just give him the nailer. Give him the nailer. He's about to die. I'm just standing there like, I'm like, yo, what's this guy doing? Who cares? He's frustrated. Like, people come out empty all the time on search warrant. He's in cuffs. I'm talking about an old, feeble man. They're old. Like 70 years old. Like, I mean, like, exaggerating.
Could you guys hear that?
It was a little low, but yes, I heard.
Okay. So just for the public's awareness, we spoke to Sergeant Fagan about the incident. He denied it. But that arrest did happen of a man named Vito Capia, who was at the time 67 years old. So I'm not going to play the next one because I guess it's too low to hear. But there's also another tape for those that want to look it up in our story of another detective, Alan Patterson, who alleged that he saw Detective Camilo Antonini, the same cop that this clip was playing about, assaulting a civilian at the police station. And Patterson claims that when he reported it, supervisors didn't investigate, but just said he should transfer from his unit. So this has not been a secret exactly, and I don't want to make it seem like that because many people in the streets of Mount Vernon talk about these narcotics detectives, including Antonini, Patterson, etc., quite a bit. But it's a little bit different when you hear officers themselves saying they witnessed this when they're not knowing they're being reported.
Let me see if I can play it for you. Hold on.
All right.
Hold on.
So wow.
This recording is of a detective named Alan Patterson. He's arguing about the place years earlier. Patterson says he reported on for assaulting in the
Can't really hear it.
Let me send me the link, AJ, because I have a boom mic here, so it might come out better.
Well, I just played. I loaded the video onto Instagram. I just played it off of that. It's in the story though, actually, isn't it?
Yeah. I think it's definitely on Twitter. I don't know if they embedded the things I sent you in the story. I'm not sure.
Oh.
I have to check.
Hold on a second.
While we're figuring that out, I just want to applaud you for, once this came to your attention, the amount of work, being the editor of Black Westchester, I can totally appreciate the amount of work that you put in, the hours of investigating, researching, looking people up, coming here to Mount Vernon multiple times. A lot of other media outlets and a lot of other people would not have done the work. So I definitely, everybody else that's listening might not realize what went into this, but I'm telling you that I appreciate the amount of work that you put into this.
Thank you.
Your dedication. You worked a couple of months on each part. Like, it wasn't just something real quick, something sensationalized, you put up, something, a couple of sound bites. I mean, you actually did a bunch of investigative reporting, which is missing from a lot of this Facebook and blog people and just, throwing stuff out there real quick.
Thank you. It took a long time to figure out like a lot of the street names and some of the context. So thank you. I appreciate that.
And one of the guys, one of the previous shows, I had my co-host, Dr. Robert Baskerville, Dr. Bob, and me and him worked on the Richard Thomas campaign in 2015 to be mayor, which is on 4th Avenue. And the guy that they arrested, that they knew that the drugs were not his. He had nothing on him, but they knew there was a stash of drugs near him. and they dug up these, and the guy that you found, the witness that you found that they couldn't find, he was on 4th Avenue, right outside Richard Thomas's campaign office every day. Like you can find this dude every day. Bob was reminding me, like he was always on 4th Avenue. He was not hard to find. If the DA had been looking for this guy, and all you had to do was ask 1 or 2 people in the street, that's my man right there. Like everybody knew where this dude hangs out outside the Chinese food place on 4th Avenue. So
Global Garden. Yeah.
So you want let me try. This is the one with the 70-year-old man. That's the one you want me to play?
That's the one I already played, but could people hear it?
Let me try it again.
A little bit. We heard it a little bit.
Okay.
Let me see if you can.
I did a search for, all.
that's better.
Officer John Campo was on the phone with a colleague, complaining about a search warrant raid that had gone wrong. He didn't know his colleague, Murashay Bavel, a police whistleblower, was recording.
Vito, the Italian dude, the old Italian dude that went for him? Yeah. I did a search warrant in this dude's house. When we hit the door, this guy goes in, hits the first door, it breaks the glass. We hit the second door. This guy, Vito, runs to the toilet, flushes all the heroin down the toilet, right? So we come up with nothing. But I got him on a sale anyway.
He said that wasn't enough for one of the officers on scene, Detective Camilo Antonini, who they call Nini.
Yeah, this guy, the 70-year-old white dude, man, I had you. Nini is smacking the living out of this dude in front of Fagan. I'm talking about, like, not little smacks. I'm talking about cocking back and smacking this dude so hard that he's losing his breath and can't breathe.
After 5 brutal minutes, he says, their supervisor, Sergeant Sean Fagan, stepped in.
5 minutes, Fagan was like, yo, Nini, just give him his inhaler. Give him his inhaler. He's about to die. I'm just standing there, like, I'm like, yo, I'm like, what's this guy doing? I'm like, who cares? He flushed it. Like, people come out empty all the time on search warrants. In cuffs, dude. I'm talking about an old, feeble man, bro. Like, old. Like, 70 years old. Like, not even, like, exaggerating.
Here's another recording, also referencing Detective Antonini.
Now, you talk about Antonini again.
This recording is of a detective named Alan Patterson. He's arguing about an incident that allegedly took place years earlier. Patterson says he reported on Detective Antonini for assaulting a detainee in the police station. But his fellow officers did not stand with him.
Everybody put their head down when I say, yo, fellas, because remember we had a meeting about this and said, yo, if he does it again, we're going to stand up and say something. And he did it again, beating that right there in the cell block, and I stood up and said, what's up, fellas? Only you put your head back on the desk.
He claimed he went to a supervisor who threatened retaliation for whistleblowing on Antonini.
He tried to front like he was on the phone and tried to walk out, and I grabbed his arm. He says, I'm going to get you for this, Al.
2 days later, he said another higher-up proposed that Patterson himself transfer from the unit.
When I said, Dad, take my shield back, I'm bouncing.
In the years that followed, Antonini, the accused detective, remained on the street, and civilians continued to accuse him and other narcotics officers of violent misconduct in complaints and lawsuits.
That's kind of the end of that clip. Yeah.
Now that we played this, I want to get our 2 guests in. Dr. Damon Brown, I saw you shaking your head a lot of time. I know some thoughts is going through. Let me hear what you think about what you just heard.
Well, it's definitely a lot. And, unfortunately, there's a huge and a larger problem there. And a lot of times this type of culture is really overtly done and practiced and covertly understood. So, me being a leadership expert that I am, everybody from a management supervisor to the executive are responsible for this. And this is one of the only ways that we are going to end up breaking this culture. So illegal operations, I don't know why that keeps going out, but illegal operations that are going on by a known detective that does this for years. I think that the first thing George mentioned was back in 2013, maybe, and he's still in the same position. We all know that narcotics is difficult because when you're dealing with narcotics too long, you become what you're pursuing, okay? So 6 months is enough. 6 months, take them on out of there. The other things is I've read some other things where I'm really starting to question the new commissioner. You know, unfortunately, you know him better than I do, but it looked like in the article, the commissioner said that I viewed or I heard the tapes, one or the other, and he said I passed them on to internal affairs. Now, let's just think for just a moment. If you saw them or you heard what was going on, you, as the executive of that organization, you need to act. So why, when we talk about transparency, why isn't it the same yardstick for police that we use for civilians? So what I'm trying to say is, if you heard or you saw that, that is at the least reasonable suspicion for you to act. And until we start using the same yardstick that we do for the civilians, nobody's going to trust the police.
Want to shout out Mount Vernon Police Commissioner Glenn Scott, who's listening to your recommendations right now. He's tuned in.
Could I clarify something about that point?
Yeah.
I just want to credit Commissioner Scott, because oftentimes when we do these stories, we don't hear, you know, what the department's perspective is. And Commissioner Scott gave me a lot of time on Friday afternoon before we published to go over everything that we're reporting on. So I want to credit him for that. I also want to clarify, it was the video of the operation. We told him about that video. He said that he wasn't yet aware of that video. So he said that he was going to forward the information we sent him about those strip searches and that search warrant execution to internal affairs. So I just wanted to clarify that's sort of what he knew about this and how we reached out to him about it.
Okay, you know, that's great. I think that the article read a little bit differently, or I read into the article. But, you know, I stand with my assertions that, you know, the only way that we are going to break these cultures is if we act outside of this police culture that has been embedded in our profession for years and years and years. And in addition to that, we tend to look at everything as the same as when we have learned policing. We need to step outside of that box and really look at things and speak on things and act on things a little bit differently, because policing is this. Well, why is it that? That's our problem. Policing is what we have learned. And you know, I will tell you, I have trained and taught police all around the world, not with a single department, okay, and mentored and operationalized police all around the world. So imagine with, off the top of my head, 54 different nation police working alongside of me. So understanding police in a wider perspective is very important.
Real quick, so there was a comment from Daniel Terry who thanked George for clarifying that. Peter, can we get, you've been quiet and I want to give you a chance to speak on what you've heard so far. And, you know.
Yeah, I want to give you some perspective first in terms of Officer Bovell. He's somebody that I knew before he was a police officer. I knew him personally. I knew him as Mike. And I was kind of surprised that he wanted to be a police officer and that he became one. And I have to say, in my knowing of him personally, before he was a police officer, he was somebody with a great deal of enthusiasm, integrity, and energy. And he had a very open mind to going to the police force. And I was very, very saddened to find out that maybe the bubble that he had burst after having worked with the Mount Vernon Police Department in this capacity. But I'm a former assistant DA, and I know some of the ins of having to work with police officers in terms of going over their charges. Me personally, when I was an assistant DA, one of the things that I would try to do is that when there were infirmities in searches or problems with the case, I would point those things out to the officers, and oftentimes I would refuse to take the charge based upon things that were done. I would not write the charge. But because of the way it works in the DA's office, it's like judge shopping. They would assistant DA shop. They would go to somebody over my head or go to a fellow assistant DA, and they would have the charges written, notwithstanding the infirmities that I had pointed out. In reference to searches, there are real layers in searches. For instance, you know, when you're talking about a stop and a frisk is far less intrusive or invasive than a search that you would do in terms of a strip search or a cavity search. And just because a search may violate police rules in terms of what where it's supposed to take place does not necessarily mean that they violate constitutional. So as not to confuse the two things, you know, so an officer may be subject to internal discipline with the police department, but the search may not necessarily violate constitutional muster. So, but in terms of, you know, the searches and pursuant to search warrants have to be very, very particular in describing the areas to be searched, the things to be seized. There have to be affidavits. There has to be a return on the warrant to show the items that are taken into police custody. So it's not as though you get a search warrant and it gives a blanket search of all individuals, and you can go in and conduct a cavity search. It's just not that way. Antonini is somebody who is well known to me in the capacity of being a defense attorney, having been in Mount Vernon over 2 decades. I believe that Antonini was somebody that was trained when he came in the force by Huntz. And Huntz was I don't know if he's still there, but he had a whole bunch of complaints from my understanding. And I had clients complain to me quite often about that particular officer. So having been trained, I believe, by Huntz, Antonini's name had come up to me routinely as a defense attorney in terms of violence, in terms of illegal searches, in terms of planting evidence, just a lot of different activities. And what I would try to do with each individual client that brought things to my attention, I encouraged them to go downstairs to the police department and file a complaint. And I said, these complaints may not get past the front desk. They may go into the shredder. But what you do is you make them timestamp your complaint, and you take a copy of that complaint home with you, and you create a record that you file that complaint, so that even if nothing comes of it and somehow it gets lost, that complaint remains in your possession, such that when you have a situation like this where it hits the news and that name comes out, they can come forward with the complaints, with the timestamp at the police station, at the courthouse, in the court file, which is public record, of the complaints that were filed against this particular officer. But what I can tell you is that there were many, dozens of times that I've heard his name in conjunction, and it was always the same types of activities. So this doesn't come as any real surprise to me that it has finally gotten to the point of litigation and exposure at this particular time. I don't know if he's still in the force, and I know that officers are afforded due process, but based upon, if this was the court of public opinion, this officer, Antonini, would no longer be on the force.
I want to ask a quick question, because something that you mentioned, Peter, that doing a strip search in somebody's house, it might be a violation of policy, but it might not be a civil rights violation. And I want to ask both of you, and how do you correct that if it's violation of policy, but there's no accountability of the violation of policy? it becomes the norm of the department to do that. And I want both of y'all to speak on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is what I'm talking about. And I'm not talking about, you know, actually jumping the different hurdles that we have in the criminal justice system. But what I'm talking about is the reasonable suspicion of you breaking, of officer breaking rules and regs. That's enough to put him on the rubber gun squad, so to speak. That's enough to act. But when you don't act, this is, you know, my educated opinion. When you don't act, you enforce what they are doing, and they go out and they do it again, like you were saying. So that's what I'm talking about. Because management will manage, and to take them off of that squad and put them inside, off the street, does not take much doing.
Peter?
Well, let's be real about this. And when I mean let's be real about this, what it comes down to is rank racism. And when I say it's rank racism, this is an impoverished community in Mount Vernon. I live on the south side of Mount Vernon, and I choose to live on the south side of Mount Vernon. I don't have to be here, but I actually love it here. And I see a lot of my clients out on the street. To me, they're like family. But when I say it's rank racism, if you had officers going into people's homes in Scarsdale, in Lewisboro, in North Salem, in Powell and Ridge, in Bedford, all right? The lawsuits would bankrupt these police departments, and there would be a public outcry, articles in the New York Times. Officers would not only be in rubber room, officers would be fired, all right? And it wouldn't take dozens of times for this sort of thing to get that is actually done. But because this is
Pete.
Your audio. Check your audio.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We
Now
lost you.
Yeah, you
We
were
lost
saying
you. It would be fired. They would be fired.
Yeah.
We lost you.
Yeah, because this is a predominantly Black community. It's an impoverished community. They don't look at individuals here as having the power dynamic to make and force the change that should come within this police department. And that's how I feel about it.
But Pete, I'm going to play devil's advocate. How can you cry racism when the city's run by Black people?
Well,
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
I understand that. And, you know, to the extent that it's run by Black people, there's something still called systemic racism, right? And systemic racism is institutionalized racism. And it may now be run by Black people, but it was an inherited system from white people, all right? Because people put these structures in place at a time that Black people were powerless and did not have any ability to engage in safeguards on their own behalf. So this is not something that takes place overnight in terms of change. It's great that we have Black people who've been running Mount Vernon the past number of years, but they still have to operate within a certain dynamic because they have, you know, every political leader has somebody over their head, right? And they have people behind them in terms of the political ongoings and strings. So they still have to work within the framework of that particular system, which happens to be systemically racist.
Go ahead, Damon.
No, Brother Peter, you know, I agree with, you know, when you're talking about systemic racism. I certainly agree, but I don't agree when you said you have to. You know, we have to work. We don't have to. When Blacks obtain certain positions, we know whatever we do, good or bad, we're going to be there for just most of the time, a short period of time. And while you're there, we need to choose to do the right thing. But I want to go back just quickly, what you were talking about, and you're talking about systemic racism. And this is the part where I agree. So when you're talking about systemic racism in our society, we all are a part of our society. And there's no such thing as unilateralism. So in other words, you know, we can't be acting as if we are not a part of society. And that's where you get the acquiesce of Black leadership in policing. But what we need to understand, and we all need to understand, that policing in America was established from a white supremacist paradigm. And now, understanding that, we can move forward and try to correct the different things that we are talking about today. That's where I agree with you, Peter.
Could I add some context about that operation, just based on what Peter said? In the story, we didn't focus on whether or not the searches were legal or not, because it's very complicated. We don't have all the police reports about what, you know, indicia they used maybe in the moment to justify that kind of search. So that's why we focus on the policy, and the policy is very clear. You can frisk someone in the field if you're going to strip search them and provide the justification to strip search them. You have to do it at a police facility. They failed to do that. So in that very black and white question, that's what we reported on. But I also just want to give some context about that operation. There was a search warrant, and the search warrant was for drugs, and it named 2 people. Now, there were several people there who were hanging out. And a lot of the people who were searched were people who just happened to be there. I'm not saying that this is illegal. What I am saying is, imagine if you just happened to be at a friend's house and police officers burst in a room, stripped off your clothes, made you squat and cough, and looked into your anus. I mean, when we talk about systemic racism, like, would that happen to people in Scarsdale?
Absolutely.
Is that the kind of treatment that we want for people in Mount Vernon? And I don't say in my article that the people who this is happening to are perfect people. A lot of the people who this happens to are drug users or drug dealers, and in some ways they're controversial in the community. But the sort of routine violation of people's dignity, and in this case, police policies, can have a dangerous effect on what officers feel they are empowered to do. So there's a dangerous precedent that's being set if these kind of violations of policies are allowed to continue. And we've seen that in cities across the country. In Baltimore, there was a similar unit where officers were breaking police rules constantly, but they were getting a lot of arrests. And the department looked the other way. They ended up becoming a unit that was just carrying out scores of robberies and assaults constantly. And there have been similar allegations in Mount Vernon regarding this unit. So once you let the genie out of the bottle, you know, you may not get what you wish for.
But George, that's just it. That's just it, right? The idea that you have drug dealers and you have drug users,
Right.
and police officers can see them in the community. They know who they are. They target them. They jump out of the car.
Correct.
They perform an illegal search on them. And
Correct.
who's going to question that? Because
Correct.
so the letter of the law is what the letter of the law is.
Correct.
Regardless of
That's
what
right.
your history has been, it's kind of thing that Giuliani used to do, that every time you had an incident, they would pull out the rap sheet after the fact and say, well, the 20 prior convictions, to try to justify the action of the particular officer. There is either justification or there's no justification. It's either a legal search or an illegal search. So it's a slippery slope. And they know that their word will always be taken over somebody who's been previously arrested for drugs if they find drugs on this given occasion due to an illegal search.
Let me real quick, Commissioner Scott is listening, and he actually is commenting. He said earlier, excellent suggestion, Peter. Narco has been disbanded for months since the Gothamists started publishing these tapes. These search warrants are brand new. Everyone is assuming that we had these tapes, but we just recently acquired them directly from Rovell. We are not even sure that we have them all. We just got the tapes transcribed and met with the DA's office, who has the tapes. who had these tapes to ask about their investigation. But my IAB is now actively investigating all information that we received, and I sent an email to George Joseph requesting a copy of the audio and video evidence to be sent to my IAB. Also, Yonkers PBA president, Keith Olson, said he's driving in his car, but he's listening. And there was another comment. Ali Holzberg said earlier, from what I've been reading about Mount Vernon Police Department, I'm amazed a higher authority like the Federal Justice Department or the FBI had not looked into it yet, like what happened in Yonkers a few years ago.
Well,
those are some of the comments, and there's more, but I want to get those, and I want to get the commissioner's comments.
But I just have one question, with all due respect to Commissioner Scott, and I love him dearly as a brother. We go back. Is Antonini still on the street? That's the question. Is he still involved in cases? While IAB and whatever is reference to the DA's office, is he still on the street taking cases? That's the question. Because the new district attorney, she's going to have to, and she made a statement. She made a statement about the article, Mimi Roca, who won the primary.
Right.
If she's truly on accountability, she has to go through all his cases at this point is questionable. They are all questionable. And if you still got this man in the street handling cases, moving forward after this is made public, you're wasting the taxpayer dollars. He should be somewhere at a desk, or as Brother Damon said, with a rubber gun somewhere, taking target practice. But he should not be handling cases for the integrity of the police department moving forward. Not just having IAB, they have to do their job. Right. But if he's still out there arresting people and doing cases, then you know what? It's going to make the new DA that already put a statement about this story. It's going to make her job harder because she's going to have to go through all of his cases.
And one more thing real quick.
And Peter can respond to that.
One more thing real quick. While we have the commissioner listening, we have a listener who wants to know from the commissioner, what discipline actions will the commissioner take against these officers? This is a Mount Vernon resident that is asking the commissioner that. So I wanted to read that as well. Go ahead, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Glenn responded that General Investigation Unit, no arrest. That was the response, I guess, to whatever you just said.
What? Who responded to that?
Commissioner Scott just said General Investigations Unit, no arrest.
Now I know Brother Peter is going to go ahead and speak it. I just want to say, I'm back in what Damon was talking about. Is that the bar at this very moment? This is what we're talking about. Is that the bar? We have tons and tons of reasonable suspicion, the same way we deal with civilians and the public. We pull that man off the street. So go ahead, Peter. I'm sorry.
Can I read one more thing real quick too?
Yeah.
Yonkers PBA president said narcotics policing should be the most heavily supervised and overlooked part of policing.
Damon, I have a question for you about that sort of standard. In this case, Damon Brown.
Dr. Brown.
Dr. Brown, in this case, it's not just suspicion. There's a video of these officers, including Detective Antonini, violating police policy. So, I mean, I don't know what kind of standard that would be, but that's what happened here.
Yeah, that would be absolutely, George. But yeah, absolutely. But what I'm going with the smallest measure in which police act on, and I'm applying that to the police themselves. So the smallest measure is reasonable suspicion, and then probable cause. So we have reasonable suspicion, we need to do something. That's all I'm saying. And real quick, I am in Baltimore County, and the people in the jump out squad that you're speaking about, you know, the one guy just got 20 years and the sergeant tried to retire and they pulled him out of retirement and charged him too. So,
Wow.
so you know, I want to make sure that, you know, we set the record straight when we're talking about that type of
Right.
policing and how they can be prosecuted.
Right.
I think Peter was also.
Peter.
Go ahead, Peter.
No, I was just gonna say, you know, it puts law enforcement to a certain degree. It poses a dilemma for them because, as you well know, it's kind of an incestuous relationship, right, between the police departments and the DA's office.
Right.
The DA, they rely upon their own individual investigators that are within the DA's office, which many of them are former police officers that they take from a variety of departments throughout Westchester County. But they also rely upon the arresting officer in the individual jurisdictions in Westchester to make the case. Now, if you have an officer who's been on the force for a number of years, and he has a lot of felony cases, now you have a situation where if you turn around and you're a prosecutorial agency against that particular officer, you basically, as Damon was kind of alluding to, you've basically made all those cases essentially beyond, not beyond reasonable doubt cases, or cases where they're subject to suppression at suppression hearings. And, you know, there's also the aspect of, okay, everyone knows about Brady versus Maryland Brady material, which is exculpatory material that the DA's office has in their possession that they have to turn over to the defense. It's gone many years here in Westchester County where defense attorneys have not had access to things that the police department, things that the DA's office has had regarding bad actors in the police department, such as potentially Antonini, in reference to prosecutions to use as impeachment material. So, you know, the DA's office, they're about numbers, right? They need to have a high quality in terms of prosecution, and they've enjoyed the luxury of 90-something% conviction rates in many of the DA's offices. And if they start to impugn the integrity of the investigations of the officers in the individual jurisdictions, that rate is going to be precipitously low, potentially. And I would challenge the DA's office as to whether or not they're going to do that. Because if their conviction rates drop, I don't think that they're going to be subject to attack come election time. So, you know, there's that dynamic that you have to consider.
If I could echo what Peter is saying, Detective Antonini alone has over 500 arrests in his career, many of which were during his time in the narcotics unit. And so a lot of police officers in the department have said that they don't feel like any police commissioner or any DA wants to, you know, look what's under the rug and look potentially what's under the rug, because a lot of supervisors who look the other way or didn't do anything in the past, mid-level commanders, could be implicated. So we're at a crossroads now, new administration, promising change, a new commissioner who's investigating this, who has these tapes now, who has this video, or will soon have this video now that we published. Are they willing to look under the rug and really investigate this and do something about it? That's an important question, I think.
Real quick, so we had a couple more comments. Tamika Douglas said, there will be no change without accountability. William Dundon said, hi guys from Northern Ireland. And welcome Judge Adrian Armstrong, who's tuned in. There was a couple more. Colleague Pratt, I'm sorry I just messed up your name, I apologize, said Damon Brown is right and exact about the foundation of police departments in America being founded on racist, social, economic ideas. Hold on, to see more. I'm trying to get to the bottom of that comment. Ideas, at their inception, they are basically overseers paid to keep the status quo on the larger plantation called America. That was another one. Another comment just came in. Len Holzman said, how many of those 500 arrests have been thrown out? And it's an interesting question because I know, and then we got Keith from Yonkers on. I know we did a story about 2 officers who were falsifying a lot of search warrants and everything in Yonkers or whatever. And Janet DeFleur, being the DA at the time, had to end up throwing out some of the cases that these officers were involved in, and some that were about to come to court ended up not ever reaching court. And we did a story on a young man, Jamal Smythe, in Peekskill, who was supposedly the officers had lied at his court case and whatever. He was sentenced to 15 years served for. He was released and his sentence were vacated because of these officers.
But with that case, with Jamal Smythe, right? And we worked on it closely. Here's the imbalance in justice. Jamal Smythe did 4 years of a 15-year off of officers lying. And these officers did 15 weekends.
One got 8 weekends.
8
and
weekends.
The other one got 20 weekends.
20
weeks of weekends.
Weekends in jail, right? They got weekends in jail for doing what they were doing to people and sending them false arrests, false testimony, probably false.
Somebody went out the window and they were trying to say it was suicide, but the ME wouldn't sign off on it and said it's 35 years. He's never seen someone jump out the window and land on their back, so he wouldn't sign that it was suicide.
Right.
Which is the case that brought them to light, and I don't know whatever happened with that case.
But when we talk about the racism, the systemic racism in law enforcement, but when we also talk about we being Black people, right, and getting in these positions of power and being Black faces in high places, and if we don't address the policies and legislation, not just the police commissioner, but the city council, the mayors, and the Black cities, not just Mount Vernon. This going, and Damon can tell you too. This is all over, right? When you travel, you find out a lot of the nonsense is all over. We fail to address these issues, and why? Right? It doesn't make any sense, right? We can't, sometimes you can't even blame the white man. You can't even say racism, because if we're in charge and we see the need for change and we don't change it, then we're just as bad as the racist white commissioner. We're just as bad as the racist white mayor, just the racist white person, because that's what Michelle Alexander book would it slipped over a lot of Black people when she said, all these years, laws and legislations were being passed that created the new Jim Crow. But all these years, we had Black senators, Black congressmen, Black judges, Black mayors, Black governors, and they continue to allow these laws and legislations to pass, which created mass incarceration. Now that we're coming up, we done had a Black president, and we might have the first Black female vice president. When the hell are we going to get it right? When are we going to start making laws and correcting the policing institutions in the communities that we can correct it? When are we going to do it? Like, what else do we have to wait for? I've been in this game 30 years. Do I gotta wait another 30 years for some Black people in charge to correct the damn system? What does it take, man? Like, at this point, it doesn't make any sense. Should no white officer be running around a Black city that's run by Black people violating the people that put him in office? Absolutely not. He should be on a milk carton somewhere, missing. And I don't understand. I really don't understand this.
But do they really want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If Anthony, I mean, he has 500 cases, right? Now, I imagine that many of those cases have resulted in convictions and that people are doing time. Do they really want to see those convictions overturned, like every last one of them potentially, because of the infirmities that he's had in a number of those? Me personally, as a defense attorney, I would say that if that's what it comes down to in terms of credibility, then overturn all 500 if that's what it means. It means that you have to get officers that not only obey your internal policies of the police department, but are trained and obey the law. And if they can't do it, then invalidate their arrest, invalidate the convictions, and find good officers. And you have to have the strength in terms of leadership. If you really are about change, making change, and you love your community, then do as you say you're going to do.
Exactly, brother. Because look, I'm in correction, right? My commissioners don't give a damn about morale, right? They tell you straight up, your morale is your paycheck you get every 2 weeks, enabling you to buy nice things and send your kids to college. That's your morale. As leadership, as law enforcement leadership, your loyalty is to policy, procedure, training, and the budget. And if the officers underneath you can't do that job by the policies, procedures, and training, then they need to get a job somewhere else, because that's what they tell us. And that's how I came up. So I literally don't understand at this point, why is this being allowed? I don't, and not just Mount Vernon, but all these other police departments that allow this nonsense to go on, and they allow people that come outside of the community, they don't even live in the community, they're not even from the community, to violate the people in their community and get paid for it. And then police leadership want to say, we worried about morale, when they're making the most money out of that municipality. That doesn't make any sense.
Tamika Douglas said, cronyism and nepotism contributes, to the power trips, corruption, and incompetence in leadership. Damon is making great points. And she also said, I think that's the latest one. Shout out to everybody else who's tuned in. She also thanked us for Damon. She said thank us for always having these conversations, for always bringing these topics out to the forefront. So, and someone else said that too.
Go ahead, man. You was gonna say something. I can't hear you. We can't hear you, brother.
Are you muted?
No.
No, you're not muted.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
No, I can't hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you. We can't see you.
Can't see you. I can hear you.
Okay, we can hear that.
Okay, go ahead.
Now we don't see you or hear you. Now we see you, can't hear you. Gotta love Zoom. we see you, but we don't hear you.
Damon, log out and come back in.
Yeah, that usually works.
In terms of like the current administration, these are challenges for the current administration. And I think that we have to give the current administration a chance
Absolutely.
to do what they need to do. And one of the things that I would applaud thus far is transparency, to not sweep things underneath the rug, to use social media, use the news, give statements on it, and allow the public to know that this is a problem in the community. This is what's taking place. Now there has to be, this is what our response is to it at some juncture. I don't know when that's going to occur. I don't know the investigations that are occurring now, but Antonini has been a problem, what I can tell you, for many, many years. This is not something new in this particular community.
If I could speak on that in terms of transparency, in June, a law called 50A, which for decades kept police disciplinary and misconduct records secret, was repealed. And so I did a Freedom of Information law request asking for police misconduct and internal affairs records on Detective Antonini and many other officers in the department. So far, we haven't gotten them. I'm not saying that the city isn't going to turn them over, but the law department has not turned them over. And so in terms of transparency, what Peter is saying, that's a very easy first step. These records could be made public. Civilians and citizens could hear what the police department has known, what sort of patterns have arisen from civilian complaints, how many complaints have been there. Is the department willing to turn over those records and let everyone assess them themselves? The other thing is, in the short term, Commissioner Scott, while we were on this call, just emailed me asking for the videos. Those are police videos of that search warrant operation. So those are videos showing rules violations being done by the department's officers. In the short term, that some action could be taken there. And then in the long term, the listener asked about these 500 past arrests. The answer is a lot of those did result in convictions that haven't been thrown out. And not many people, from people I speak to in terms of activists or attorneys or police officers, have much faith that the current DA is going to actually review and throw out those convictions if need be, although they claim that they are reviewing and investigating. But potentially, a new DA will be elected in the coming months and could also take that on.
Real quick, and Damon Jones, if you can speak to this. Keith Olson, but briefly, Keith Olson said morale may be the most important factor in having a healthy police force. And then someone else says the culture creates morale. If you want to, because you were talking about morale, so.
Morale is your every 2 weeks. You get paid. Like nobody's volunteering to do this. You get paid every 2 weeks. Like we use that morale as a scale. Morale is low. But police are some cops are taking home $4,000 checks after 2 weeks. Yeah, and if your morale is not high, taking home $4,000, $3,500, $3,000 every 2 weeks, when a lot of these people out here don't have jobs, then something's wrong with your psyche, right? But the whole thing is you get paid every 2 weeks. That's your morale. And if that's not enough for you to do your job, right? Do your job correctly, because the pushback against police is not the good cops, right? The pushback in the Black community is not about the good cops. It's about the bad ones that they are not being held accountable, right? And I love Keith Olson, but I'm not going to fall for that union stuff, right? Because that's the stuff they say. Well, morale is low. Well, you make a lot of money. You make a lot of money, So I bet you if someone from McDonald's had that job, they wouldn't be talking about morale. They'll be enjoying.
Yeah, I think you froze for a second.
Yeah, and
we lost you.
Yeah, one question from the audience is Lynn Holzberg said, it sounds like Mr. Antonini wields a lot of power / influence. ...
No.
Will he come on here to give his side? I wanted to read that. I wanted to read that.
Go ahead, Brother Peter.
He doesn't wield power. What it is he knows. It's like anything else, right? If you're allowed to do things without correction, without discipline, and with impunity, routinely, over and over and over again, to the extent that he has 500 arrests, and no one has called him, in terms of potentially firing him, taking him off of the squad that he was on in terms of narcotics, or making him go through the academy. I don't know what's done with police officers, but a lot of this comes from above. A lot of this comes from the culture. It's amazing to me that the officer who is attacked verbally is Officer Bovell for being a quote unquote rat in the department for exposing corruption, but the officers don't attack Antonini and remain silent. And silence is the complicity, right? You're down with this whole program of him doing it unless you're filing your own complaints. And that's where I challenge the police department. The fellow officers that are complaining on the phone should be the ones that are filing formal complaints or lawsuits or going to the DA and saying this officer needs to be off the force.
Exactly.
And really, nothing less than his firing, if all of these claims are proven to be true, nothing less than his firing would be acceptable to me.
And if I'm not mistaken, in George's story, Officer Patterson, he said that all the officers behind the scenes were saying, if he does it again, we're going to do something about it. We're going to speak up. And then he did it again. And when he looked around, it was like crickets. Nobody else was speaking but him. Like everybody had their head down. But they said they were going to do something. If he did it one more time, he did it one more time. And Patterson found himself out there by himself.
Well, hey, Brother Damon, I think, you always talk about, that's part of the police culture, man. Educate the listeners on that too, and how hard it is for even, you're talking about Black officers, right? Dealing with this police culture and even dealing with a crooked white officer. So, talk about the police culture, man, for the listeners.
Well, what happens is, I think people don't realize, and what people need to ask themselves first is, when was the last time they turned somebody in on their job? I don't care what job it was, but when was the last time that you turned somebody in on your job? And have you thought about it? Okay, so just think about that. But police culture, we are talking about, especially for a Black officer, when we're turning in officers that aren't doing, what they're supposed to be doing or violating rules. Number one, we got to be prepared to lose some assignments. Number two, we got to be prepared to be ostracized. Number three, you got to be prepared to fight. And I'm not lying to you, because I have, put in numerous complaints. Matter of fact, I put in a complaint about a terrible, terrible shooting when I was on the job, and I told the commander, and the commander went across the street and told all of the people that were involved, you got to watch Brown. You got to watch Brown. So after that, I had to go to different calls, and when the weapons came out, I had to make sure I'm in the back.
That's right.
So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about an in-depth, corrupt police culture. So it's very easy for civilians to say, you go and do this and you got to report. And really, I really reward these Bovell and the other officers that are doing this thing, because they know what's at stake also. But I just want to move forward just a bit. I hope that explained it to some of our viewers, but I want to move forward with Damon was talking about when he was talking about chiefs and what are they going to do and why don't they do these different things. With all of these salaries that they are getting, what we're finding out now is that these many police chiefs, and I'm not necessarily talking about the department Westchester we're talking about, they're not capable. They have been pulling the wool over our eyes. They have been promoting these sergeants through the ranks with the same measures. And next thing you know, they're chief, and they couldn't lead sheep across the street. So that's what we're finding. We turn around and we look at Seattle. You finally have a crisis, and look, I love your chief best, but you finally have a crisis and you do everything counterproductive. Not one move, but one after another, after another. Okay, we turn around and we look at Atlanta PD, and this is important. I don't know if anybody has listened to Atlanta PD. The mayor gave the former chief a soft landing, and what she said, I'm not capable of changing the culture of APD. She said it. She's not capable. So until we have capable leadership, a lot of these things aren't going to change, and it's the leadership's responsibility to go ahead and be more accountable than it is just an officer.
Yep. Let me tell you, man, I've seen officers at my job get suspended 120 days for attendance. right? So imagine excessive force. It's called behavior modification. You know,
Right.
you have to drop the hammer if you want your police department to run by your policies, procedures, and training. You have to drop the hammer. And it's okay to have your rank and file scared as hell. Because if the officer do something and the supervisor don't correct it, you write the damn supervisor up. Right. Somebody gonna lose days.
Right.
Somebody's gonna lose days.
Right.
So if everybody, and this is how I came up in correction. This is how they managed us. And we dealing with inmates all day, every day, not just on a call, but all day, every day. So that's how it should be. We are a paramilitary
Absolutely.
unit. We're not a social club. We're a paramilitary unit. And if they're not going to follow the policy set forth by management, then their ass need to be written up.
Let me ask you a question. What is the probationary period? What is the probation? I said, what is the probationary period for the officers?
Usually a year. It's a year.
Maybe that's too short of a period. Maybe the probationary period should be 3 years. Maybe it should be 3 years because it's serious enough of a job where you're vested with the power to take somebody's life. You have the ability to take somebody's freedom. You have the ability to invade somebody's privacy.
You're covering the speaker. I think you're covering the speaker. Yeah.
Now we can hear you though.
Now check it.
Well, Peter, while you're getting something together, I just want to mention that is the probationary period and the training. That's not where the officer goes bad. That's not, the officer goes bad in the training. Now, mind you, this officer Chauvus up here in the George Floyd, he was a training officer.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So that's where the officer goes bad.
Exactly. It's these. Let me tell you, it's these FTOs, man. I'm up here in Wallkill. I had it out with one of these FTOs up here, and I told the supervisor, he's going to get somebody killed. You cannot have this guy training somebody, right? So it goes back to what Damon was saying, right? Part of the management, because what we call a lucky Saturday, right? You get promoted, you get 100 on a supervisor's test. You was a horrible damn officer.
Right.
You didn't know the community. You didn't care about the community. Then they want to make you a supervisor. Now, how are you going to supervise, right, the rank and file, and you was a horrible officer yourself? It's the fruit from the poisonous tree. Because we continue to promote people that should never be promoted and put them in charge over new fresh minds. Because like you said, they come out of the academy, they know policy, they know procedure, right? They've been trained, and they get with old Sarge, they get with old and throw all that stuff out, and the next thing you know, they go upstairs to the detective bureau, then they learn their bad habits.
Right.
Then this is how we do it, right? And like I said, what's going on in Mount Vernon, it's probably going on in Yonkers.
Yes.
Going on in Greenberg, going on in White Plains, because it's a culture. So where did they learn it from? They probably learned it from some officers in Yonkers or some officers down in NYPD.
Right.
This is how we do it. So it's a culture, and it has to change. And if people that are in charge, if we're going to say Black Lives Matter, right? If we're going to rally and do all that other great stuff in the era of George Floyd, we better damn well make sure that if we're in charge of these policies, procedures, and training, we're going to hold our officers accountable. It's not an impossible, request, for our leadership to do.
And I just want to add one more thing. As far as the Mount Vernon Police Department, we have to stop taking other people's garbage. Officers get in trouble somewhere else, and they end up getting jobs in Mount Vernon Police. They get suspended or fired or whatever. They end up getting jobs. One officer, I can't remember the name of the story. I can pull it up later for everybody listening. Was disciplined for a whole bunch of situations. End up coming to Mount Vernon and end up being in internal affairs or one of those departments with they like. How is he there? Like, you understand what I'm saying? So we have to stop taking other people's garbage because they didn't work out in their departments, and somehow they landed jobs in Mount Vernon. And then when you take other people's garbage, as I saying, garbage in, garbage out. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I mean, you know, you can't take people's garbage, you know. So I just want to put that in there because I've done a lot of stories, and I know Sleepy Hollow, Tarrytown, and several other departments, these people have been fired or disciplined, and they had to be moved out of them, and there was a job waiting for them in Mount Vernon.
Well, that's what the nepotism and cronyism is about. Because somebody will say, "Well, I know I have somebody in this department. I can get you."
Your audio goes in and out, in and out.
Yo, are you covering your phone with your hand?
Now you're out altogether.
You may have to, yeah.
Maybe I have to get it off and on.
Okay. Well, you know, I just want to go back a little bit, and I do want to comment what Damon said when we're talking about morale. And actually, I don't go for it either. Morale is derived from morality, and morality is intrinsic. That's the bottom line. Nobody should make you do anything. Like you said, you're getting your pay, but what kind of officer do you want to be? What kind of person are you? That's where morale comes from, inside of you. So,
yeah.
Well, I'm not gonna continue with that, but Keith Olson, the PBA president in Yonkers, left a nice long comment in the comment section about morale.
Keith, I love you, man. We just got to do it. We got to do another show together, man. We can't
right, so y'all can, so we don't have just a whole conversation about morale. But I mean, it's available for anybody who wants to read it in the comment section.
Okay, great.
So I'm pointing it out. So, let me put Peter back in. Peter just came back. Hold on. So where do we go? Where do we go from here? I know. Well, first, you know, we're dealing with this pandemic, and that's twisted everybody else. We do have a new administration who was in office maybe a month or so before this COVID thing hit, the pandemic. And when the new mayor came in, the new police commissioner came in. So, you know, we just had a primary, and we have a new, someone who beat the incumbent in the district attorney's office, and most likely will be the new district attorney come January, unless something changes and something happens in November. Who seems to be one of the things I liked about her, and we publicly endorsed her. Some of the things we're talking about, she says she would not take her investigators. She wouldn't pick them from the departments that, you know, that she was, and she wouldn't take any. She wouldn't take any endorsement. I mean, any donations from officers and departments that and elected officials that she may have to prosecute in the future. You know, and I thought that, and she wouldn't take none from the police unions either. You know what I'm saying? Because I think we've seen you're sometimes beholden. You need money to run, and a lot of us don't have the large sums of money to give these candidates that we believe in money, and developers and people with their own agendas give large sums of money. And then sometimes here's a white guy told me, I think Damon said something, they told him something similar. He was like, when we get money, a white guy said, we get money, we buy, I mean, y'all get money, y'all buy Cadillacs, y'all buy jewelry, y'all buy this. We get money, we buy politicians. I was like, wow. I was like, wow. But they answer to who gave them large sums of money. You know what I'm saying? So her not taking donations from those kind of things gave me some hope. So where do we go from here? I know, you know, where do we go from here?
Before we answer that, so you mentioned Mimi Roca, and in reference to the story, she posted on her
Oh
Facebook
yes,
page.
yes.
She said, and I'm reading from Mimi Roca, who won the Democratic primary for district attorney. She said, these allegations are incredibly serious and disturbing. If I am fortunate enough to take office as Westchester district attorney, I will thoroughly investigate these types of claims with a type of urgency they deserve. Bring unprecedented transparency to the Westchester DA's office. Not rely on testimony of officers against whom there are credible allegations of misconduct. Work with the Westchester police agencies on clear use of force protocols and stronger accountability. That was the statement from Mimi Roca on her Mimi Roca for District Attorney page in reference to the article that was written.
And let me just say, we have to, and she's not going to be able to go in there January 1st and just turn decades of whatever around. You know what I'm saying? It's going to take work.
Absolutely.
And that's why I brought up, you know, with the new administration, you know, they were in there about a month and they're, you know, Corona. I will say this about Commissioner Scott. First off, we haven't had, let's be real, we haven't had a commissioner. Or we had Commissioner Robert Kelly in the beginning of Richard Thomas campaign for a couple of months. Then we had a series of acting or deputy commissioners acting. Then one of the acting commissioners became commissioner under Andre Wallace for a couple of months. This is our first commissioner, really appointed commissioner
in 4 years.
In 4 years. So, and I have talked to, and I have had conversations with him, and he's going back through, because we covered the officers and things in the department very well while he was after he left the department. And he came to me for some of the, you know, some of the stories so he can look, and he would know when to look and what time frame to look at as he's looking at stuff. No one's going to be able to just turn around decades and decades of systematic whatever. And we have to, we can't expect that. And just like with a mayor, whether you like this one or not, no one's coming in the city of Mount Vernon and becoming the mayor and they're going to solve all our problems. Black people, we got to stop looking for a savior. There's some stuff we need to do for ourselves. I just want to put all that out there. But
well, and another thing in defense of Glenn Scott, he has to be allowed to run his department.
Yes.
He has to. It can't be interference from City Hall. It has to be, he's going to run his department and let him do what he needs to do as the commissioner of the department. You know, the history of Mount Vernon is that it's just too much going on. And it goes back, you know, I mean, it goes back to even Ernie Davis. You know, politicians want to be police commissioners, right? And not allowing the police commissioner to do their job, right? I mean, it goes all the way back. So this is the history that this department has, unfortunately, right? So if he's allowed to do his job, and yes, he only been there this year, you know, and he's facing 4 years of total dysfunction. Mm-hmm. And we give him credit for being transparent as he has been, you know, but the people should also be vocal in the change also. And the people should support the change, you know, and they should be aware of what's going on. So, you know, I'm just saying, man, we support this brother, right? But he's facing, he got a lot on his plate. You know, he has a lot on his plate, and hopefully, you know, what the DA will do, you know, come in and do what she says that she's going to do. But, you know, it also has to be accountability on all levels of management. You know, it has to. It has to, because if management was doing their job, a lot of this stuff wouldn't have been going on.
And I just said that real quick, and I just say that because, you know, usually Black Westerners, we get the reputation, we're anti-cop, we're anti-everything, we're just destructive and all this other stuff. Yo, you know, I've been critical. I have been critical of Glenn Scott since he's been in office, but out of love, and out of love for my city. You know what I'm saying? Like, I actually want to see him do a good job. I've been critical of the mayor to her. You know what I'm saying? Not always in public. You know what I'm saying? Because I want to see her do a good job. I was very critical of Richard Thomas. I actually did want to see him do a good job. You understand what I'm saying? So it's not that, but I mean, this is our right as voters and as residents to critique these elected officials and public officers that salaries pay for them. You understand what I'm saying? We help them get there, and we do have the right to question them. You know what I'm saying? Like, because there's some people like, oh, you're being too hard. No, you should be harder. Maybe, like you talk about those other communities like Scarsdale and them, they don't take that stuff. If you're not going to do what need to be done, you're not going to be there long. You understand what I'm saying? We have to stop accepting just whatever is given to us and say, oh, that's just the way it is. No, that's not the way it has to be. You understand? But you have to, the resident, you have to make up that mind that you no longer want it to be that way. Go ahead, George.
I was just going to say that I agree with both you and Damon Jones's points that these are long-standing cultures and you can't change it overnight. But that being said, in this story, there is action that could be done. There's a specific case on video with a specific policy that's been clearly violated. There's no denying the violation. So we don't need to throw up our hand and say, it's so hard to change anything, nothing can be done, decades of systemic issues. Something could be done here. I don't know what the right solution is, but something could be done. And whatever they do or do not do will reflect on how seriously they take these violations of rules, which the police officers themselves say are routine. The supervisor who approved the operation said he had been doing strip searches during search warrants in apartments for as long as he could remember. So what is going to happen now that this is on video, now that this has been presented to the department? There's something concrete there. It's not just he said, she said.
You have a listener that's agreeing with you. Karen Newworth said the commissioner should commit to, at the minimum, placing these officers on desk duty so they cannot continue to violate people's rights and terrorizing the community. Once this happens, the commissioner, DA, etc., can conduct their investigation. That's what a listener. Karen Newworth just added.
And I don't want to repeat myself and going over some of the things that we talked about, but George is absolutely right. And that's the point that I brought up in the beginning. And the other point is we have to understand when we have to step out of this box of what we call policing, which has historical problems of us addressing accountability and the community. And so just like I said, the law should not be the bar. We talked about rules and regulations, and I understand, the expert in Brother Peter over here linking it to, what happens in the courtroom. But when rules and regulations are broke, then it's up to the agency to deal with that very quickly to protect the community.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Peter?
He has to go. He commented.
Oh, okay.
All right, brother.
Any last words before you go, though? Is there anything you want to say?
I just would like to see something concrete come from this.
Absolutely.
And because, this recently has come to light for a lot of people, but not for the people who have been going through this in the Mount Vernon community. It's been a long-standing problem. And an example has to be made right here, right now, in this time, especially with all the things that are taking place that are taking place around the United States right now. So
absolutely,
that's what I would like to see. I don't want there to be a minimum. I want there to be a maximum, because that's what this serves. All right.
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right. All the best. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for
brother.
taking the time to be with us. And anytime, feel free to, come through, hit me and Damon, while we're dealing with these topics. We enjoy your expertise and what you brought to the conversation, my brother.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm clear. I wasn't saying that things shouldn't be done right now. I was just giving, I was just putting things in context. There's a lot of times we'll look for, you know what I'm saying? Like, when things have been wrong for so long, one person is not going to come in and correct all things. They're not going to move fast enough for everybody. They're not going to be able to address what everybody wants them to address at the time they want them to address it. Because what's important to you is important to you, but sometimes you got to look at the bigger picture. But I don't want it to look like I'm disagreeing with what George is saying. There is some action items that can be done now. And in us giving you, and I'm saying we should give you the opportunity, but you should use that opportunity to show the community by taking some of these action items, doing some of these things, and people will believe in you a little more. You will get a little more of the support of the community when they see, shout out to Corey Pegues. I saw that he was tuned in earlier. I don't know if he's still here. Him and Damon, I've gone to a bunch of press conferences, and when people, let's put it this way, if the officers in Eric Gardner would have got arrested, would have got suspended, arrested, went to jail, whatever, you might not have had a George Floyd. Because then people would have had, see, when people get killed with impunity and nothing ever happens, then you're not worried about nothing happening to you. But when you've seen across the nation, even if it's 1,000 miles away on the coast, somebody went to jail for doing this stuff, and also that someone went to jail for not intervening, you're gonna have a lot of officers be like, hey, you're not gonna jam me up. They're gonna be talking to their partners, because there's examples of, they're cracking down on this stuff. Like David talked about cracking down at corrections. Corrections is not what it used to be when he got there. They have made some changes, and either you went along with the changes or you got your ass out of there. You know what I'm saying? And the change is going to come. That was one of the themes that Damon was saying in the debate, if you will, with the Yonkers PBA president. Change is going to come. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, you're gonna have to get used to it, and roll with it. You know what I'm saying? And adjust. I mean, change is constant all the time. You can't. That's what it is. If there was a change, go ahead.
I listen. Law enforcement, man, we understand money, right? at the end of the day, we understand. We understand money, and when you see your coworkers suspended, right? When you see, in my job, they will come over to the building, whichever building, and SIU, which is our internal affairs, they will come with these stack of blue, we call them the blue sheets. Now, when you see these stack of blue sheets with white sheets on top, those are department charges. And they will come with these stacks, man. And they will hand them out like Skittles and make officers sign for them. Or you get called over there. But when they send in a message, they'll come to the building and let people know that they hammering down, right? And then when people start getting time taken away from them, right, it sets a standard that the department is not going to accept certain actions or violations of their rules and regulations. Now, when you don't have that, or when you go for 3 to 4 years without that type of behavior modification, when that person comes in, it's going to be harder for him. It's going to be real hard, because not only he's going to have to rank and file, but he's going to have to really get his supervisors correct, right? And he might have to suspend, the supervisors too, for them not supervising properly. So it's really going to take time, to get a department that really hadn't had a real police commissioner in 4 years.
Well, I want to say too, and this is not in defense of Richard Thomas, but let's not think that this all started with Richard Thomas. There was a reason why when Richard Thomas was running, that the city of Mount Vernon said Ernie Davis got to go. There was a lot of things going on. But
I agree with that. But even under Ernie, you had a certain structure.
Well, yes.
Leadership in the police department, whether you agreed with it or not.
Right.
Whether they were hard-handed on the black officers and not on the white, it was a structure there, right? They didn't have it. He only had it that little time that Commissioner Kelly was there, right? And
like 2 months, 3 months,
right?
Yeah.
And Commissioner Kelly had them scared because they knew he wasn't going to tolerate the nonsense.
And that's why he no longer has a job with the Mount Vernon Police Department.
Exactly. So,
he would not co-sign some of the things that they wanted to do. He actually publicly on the record said, this is illegal, immoral, and whatever, and I'm not signing off on this. Like, I'm not doing it. And he and he served at the pleasure of the mayor, and the next day it was no longer the mayor's pleasure for him to serve no more. So, you know.
Well, maybe the mayor at that point needed to go, but what I want, yeah, that's right, because what the mayor's
the mayor did go. Look, almost went to jail.
Yeah. So, you know, the history is, you know, the mayor tells a police chief, I don't care what you do to those niggas, you know, and as long as I don't hear about it. And that's traditionally, you know, but going back to what Damon was talking about, and you're talking about leadership and the behaviors, and that is at the core of transactional leadership. And that's something that all leaders should have in their toolkit. You reward good behavior and you discipline bad behavior. That's
like you do with your children.
That's how you do it. And that's what you need to do. Now, when you're talking about the officers and Eric Gardner, I'd like to say something about that, AJ. So when we talk about, correct me if I get the name wrong, Detective Camilo
Antonini.
So when we're talking about Detective Antonini is on his way to killing somebody. See,
exactly.
Yes.
You have to be at that very scene. We're seeing it now. You're beating an elderly man who is handcuffed for 5 minutes. That's what I thought I read. You correct me if I'm wrong. He's on his way to killing somebody. Let's act now, you know, and that's the point. So when you get to the scene of the Eric Gardner scene, everybody knew what that officer was about. And they weren't going to correct him that day because they didn't correct him in the previous days before.
Everybody knew what the officer from George Floyd. Everybody knew what that officer. He had 18, 19 something complaints, and he was a field training officer.
Right.
And Damon,
training that behavior.
You make a great point, because when you look at these cases of excessive force that leads to death, and then when you examine the officer in question, you see that he has a long list of complaints. And then you say, well, what happened? Like, why did nobody correct him? And you're correct. This guy is on the verge, and he will, if he's not checked, right, kill somebody. And then what are you going to do, right? Because then what are you going to say to that family, that person that he kills? He could have killed that old man slapping him. He was slapping him unconscious.
Right.
He should be arrested for that. Right? Because you can't say, you can't say, well, we don't know. Hell, it's a videotape of it.
Right.
Yeah, but his sergeant, wasn't a sergeant or command sergeant was there?
Yeah.
If I could clarify, this is a recording of Officer John Campo, who's still on the force, telling Officer Bavell in a secretly recorded phone call, I saw Detective Antonini assaulting old man who was almost 70. He was actually 67 at the time, in handcuffs. And he alleged that Sergeant Fagan was there and said the things about the inhaler, etc. Fagan says that he doesn't recall the incident, but says that he would not stand for something like that. We tried to track the man down, but this old man, Vito Capio, his brother, told us on the phone that he had passed away. Which seems to be the case.
How do we know he ain't passed away from the slaps?
We don't.
Right? We don't know. So they could have unofficially killed this man, right? From having some type of damage.
Hold on. I was reading comments. Did you say the old man died?
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
He died from the
did
incident.
pass away not directly after this, but according to his brother, who he called, he passed away. This older suspected heroin dealer. I mean, he was 67 at the time of the arrest. According to court records, even though they charged him with a sale, he pled to a 7th-degree possession. He didn't have a record before then, so he got something very light, from what I can recall. I can't remember what exactly it was. Nothing in jail or anything.
Daniel Terry, who works for the city, said there is no video of him assaulting anyone to be.
Yes, it's a recording of Campo speaking, as I clarified. It's
Okay,
not.
well, you have a witness that's a cop.
Right.
Like, what else do you need a cop being a witness of a violation, and not only assault of a man that was handcuffed? So whether it's a video or not, you have a cop saying he witnessed this.
And that was my problem.
I don't even need a video.
That was my problem with the district attorney. Sorry, David. That was my problem with the district attorney saying that this was all hearsay. So the district attorney's job was to then call those officers in to then investigate and hear them firsthand from himself and see if there was anything to it. But Scarpino just wrote it off and said, "Oh, I can't do that. That's just hearsay."
If a cop on the street says, "I see Jamal take that apple or grab that TV and put it in his car," and the cop is the only witness, he doesn't arrest him?
Right?
The cop will arrest him and it will stand up in court.
In court, the district attorney prosecutes on the word of officers. Sometimes all they have is the word of the officer. I saw him, so I apprehended him, blah, 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 case closed. You understand what I'm saying? So his word, if you're going to count on his word there, you can't say his word doesn't count.
And it's not just Officer Campo. Throughout the series, we've also played tapes from Detective Alan Patterson, Officer Avion Lee, who said that a sergeant told them to concoct a story about a drug transaction that they hadn't actually witnessed in order to justify a chase and subsequent assault of a young man. So there's multiple quote-unquote witnesses that could be reached out to here.
AJ, go ahead. AJ, this is what I'm referring to. If we want to enhance transparency and accountability. Now, what you talked about towards the ADA, district attorney, is exactly what I mean. That is good enough for civilians to be arrested, but if we use those same measures on police, now all of a sudden it's not good enough. There's no transparency there. There's no trust. There's no, enabling the accountability there. We need to use those same measures. And I know police officers, because I was one, and I continue to study in the field, face all different kind of things, and it's difficult, but you can always choose another profession. But my point is that, those are the things and the measures we need to put upon police in the 21st century.
Exactly. And let me tell you, corrections went through this. We used to punch them in the face, break their collarbone. We used to do a lot of things to inmates, and correction had to go through the changes of not being as physical, and de-escalate, and it was a lot of growing pains. I think it's time. We are in an era now that policing is going to have to go through those changes, and they're about to go through those changes. Hopefully that our politicians are not doing the Ali shuffle around this, and whether it's federal or state or county or local. But I think we're about to see a change in policing, and a lot of cops are going to retire, and a lot of them going to quit, try to transfer to Republican states that don't have the type of accountability that we're trying to put forth in police reform, and then we'll have a new generation of officers that's going to be under a new culture. So I mean, it's gonna take a minute. It's really going to take a minute. But I think what's coming down from the state and coming down from a lot of these higher municipalities, the state and the county, on a lot of different police reform. I think if you are in the mindset of the old guard, you might as well put your paperwork in and retire.
So we're coming kind of close to this, coming close to the end of the show. I wanted to give. I understand, like I do every show like it's my first and my last. I understand that even though we've done close to 300 shows, there's always somebody watching you for the first time. So you gotta do it like it's your first, and nobody's promised tomorrow, so you gotta do it like it's your last. So, you know, a lot of times when we deal with police issues, there is a critic from police departments that Damon is corrections and he's, you know, he doesn't know policing. And we really didn't engage, and we've had very qualified people on the show. We haven't engaged. What is your background? Like, just so people know, when they heard the words they're hearing it from somebody who knows what he's talking about. Tell us a little bit about your background, real quick.
Dr. Brown.
Dr. Brown, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No. I forget there's two Damons. Yeah, people say this to Damon Jones, but I wanted, you know, we have you on the show. I wanted you to just you know, briefly recap real quick, you know, so people know you know.
Yeah, I spent 20 years, approximately 20 years with Pittsburgh PD. Then I worked with international narcotics and law enforcement all around the world, training national police departments, operationalizing those police departments, developing curriculum for those police departments in post-war countries. Because what happens is that country goes into a war and the police officers just go and side with whoever they side with and throw out civil rights and human rights. They throw it out the window. So that's what I have done in my educational career. I've written in several journals about police leadership and several studies on police leadership, and I'm currently doing a study now, which is implementation, police leadership implementation. Because a lot of times we see all these strategies and everything, but can you implement them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
I just want to do that at the close.
Exactly.
I just want to do that so people.
You know what? I hang around good crop, man. You understand what I'm saying? Like, and you know, and they always use that. Well, you not a police officer. It doesn't change. Policy, procedure, training,
right?
Accountability. It doesn't matter if you're in sheriff department, police department, correction department, state troopers. Doesn't matter what department you're in. We are a paramilitary unit, and we follow policies, procedure, and training. It doesn't matter. Either you want to abide by,
cross-cutting.
Exactly. So when people use that against me, man, that's just their out because they don't want to have this conversation with me.
So
that's out.
George, any wrap up, anything that you discussed in the story that we for some reason didn't get a chance to, you want to bring that point up or anything like that?
Yeah, I just want to give a quick overview, clarify something that Daniel Terry brought up. In this last story, we both published parts of secret recordings that an active duty officer, Officer Bavell, made of his fellow colleagues. He recorded hours of phone calls with multiple fellow colleagues. And in this particular story that dropped this week, we aired allegations by those officers that they had witnessed their colleagues assaulting and tasing civilians who didn't pose a threat to them, and also engaging in illegal strip searches. And in addition to those audio tapes of officers who didn't know they were being recorded, we also published video of many of those same accused officers engaging in strip searches and anal cavity inspections that were in violation of police policy, long-standing police rules, which state that those kinds of invasive searches need to be done at the police facility, or in the case of an actual cavity inspection, by a doctor in a medical facility. I'm not going to go into the debate about whether those count as strip searches or anal cavity inspections. That's for another day. But at the very least, if you're going to call them strip searches, those need to be done at a police facility. And the officers on scene referred to them, Sergeant Fagan, the supervisor, as strip searches. So police rules say those need to be done at a police facility. And so I know that these are longstanding issues. I know there's a longstanding culture. I know there's a new administration. I know a new DA is coming. But I just want to make clear to listeners and the public who's been following our reporting and Black Westchester's reporting, this is not a he said, she said type of situation. These are videos. This is on tape. The officers are breaking police policies. And so the question that many sources in the department have asked me is the department going to do anything about this? Because a lot of people are so jaded after so much corruption in the city, malfeasance by past police leaders. Is this administration any different, or is it just singing the same old tune and doing the same old thing? So I think that's sort of what I'm waiting to see, you know, what is going to happen here. I don't have the solution of what should happen, but I'm curious to see if anything will happen when something's on video. And I just want the listeners to also know we're going to continue reporting on this. We have multiple active stories that we're working on about Mount Vernon police corruption allegations. So we are not going to forget about this. And I'm going to come on to blackwestchester.com again and talk about our future investigations. So the city should know that as well.
Matt, I just wanted real quick. So Damon, to confirm what he just said about strip searches supposed to be done at the police station, isn't that what the excuse was with the 70-something-year-old women, why they took them to the police department so they could search them? Because that is the policy. Wasn't that what we were told from the police department? Remember
and they said it was a detention, but not an arrest.
Right. But it's their policy to search them at the department. And then that's what we were told why they were even brought to the department.
Right.
So I'm just saying that's something that just recently happened that you might not know about. But those are what we were told. I think for the commissioner down to several different people. So it kind of makes the point that you're making that if they're going to search, that this should been for this individual, it should have been done at the police department too. I just want to, back that up with what you're saying. Going last words. Everybody go through last words. Dr. Damon Brown, last words. Where do we go from here? What hope is there? Someone asked about recruiting as far as changing the department. And I would like to get that to you, Dr. Brown. Recruiting, will that help getting a new crop of officers? But sometimes you got to get rid of the old crop too as you're recruiting, and the difficulties that there have been seen with recruiting in our communities. Because right now, nobody want to be a cop.
That's right. I think that, recruiting is a tough issue. One of the things that we have to recognize right now is that across the board, across the country, there's about a 10% vacancy in police officers, their manpower. So you can increase recruiting by making sure that recruiting is fair and transparent. Some of the things in doing that is you take the test and you get the answers in maybe an hour. You sit in another room and you get the answers in an hour. You have to make sure that the process beyond testing is fair. We've all heard that, okay, I took the psychological test and I don't understand how, but I wasn't selected. So when you start to do those things and when you start to really show that there is a fairness in recruiting and show people the benefits of policing and change and professional policing, then we'll be able to recruit more people, and hopefully we'll recruit more people in the Black and multicultural communities.
One last thing, and it just came to me when you was talking about taking the psychological. We've discussed this before, Damon and I, on previous shows. We talk about the mental health of the community, but we never talk about the mental health of the officers or those in the department. And from what I understand, you go through that in the beginning and you don't go through that again. Where a cop, so let me just personalize it. So as the editor of Black Westchester, 9 times out of 10 when my phone rings, somebody's rights been violated, somebody's wrongfully incarcerated, somebody's this, somebody's that. So I'm hearing people at their worst. And that's what 90% of my phone calls are. And if I don't get away from this sometimes, it will alter how I see things. You know, I have to like walk away from it. Officers, you see the most craziest stuff, violence, death, all kinds of stuff. You know, there's no way that does not alter and affect you. And there's no I believe that there should be more the mental health of the officers should be incorporated somewhere. I don't know how often or whatever. I mean, Damon said as corrections, he got to qualify once a year to use his gun for the gun. I mean, we need to be doing that for the officers, you know, mental as well. Not every year.
To be fair, AJ, Jennifer Lackert, a new commissioner hire, has said that she's going to implement those kind of programs. And
this is not a Mount Vernon thing. I'm talking about police as a whole. But I had an opportunity, since I had Dr. Brown on, I wanted to address that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, but you know, nobody is dismissing officer wellness. Officer wellness is one of the 7 pillars in Obama's final report in the 21st Century Policing Task Force. So a sick officer doesn't do any good for himself, the person he's working for, or the community. But in the past, we have had these early warning systems that supervisors have used disproportionately to punish people. They haven't used them for how they were actually designed to use. So again, it comes back to supervising. And, you know, should we put some more mechanisms in place? Yes, we can do that. I heard George talking about somebody who's trying to do that. But, you know, the mechanisms are there, you know, at least have been there traditionally, and we need to pay more attention to it. And thank you for bringing that up, AJ.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that. That has been in discussion in some of the police reform groups, and looking into the wellness of the officer. But then, as Damon alluded to, so what do you do when you come across an officer that has been exposed to incidents that the regular public has never been exposed to? Seeing a person's head blown out and having a baby in a freezer, these have effects on people, right? We all human beings, right? So what do you do if you send that person to get a psychological evaluation, right? But then it comes back that something might be wrong. Because the first thing they do is take their gun, right? They take their gun. They'll take them off and put them inside, and then now that officer has a stigma around him, right? Because this is a culture, right? Do that officer want that stigma? A lot of times they don't want to get help because of the response of the department. As Damon says, they're gonna take their gun, and once you get your gun taken, that's a sign to the rest of the people that something is wrong with you, even if you're going through some personal changes. So we have to change how we, as Damon said, how we respond. And we also have to look at legislation. If that officer is, because of what he has seen on the job, should that officer be able to retire with full benefits and pension? Because now hey George, are you getting ready to go?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, last words. Give me your last words.
Well, just thank you again, you, AJ, and Damon Jones in this case, but also Dr. Brown, for this great conversation. It's nice to see you again, Dr. Brown. And I just really appreciate Black Westchester for having me on. You guys have a great locally rooted audience, and it's really important to do in the day in, day of reporting so that the public knows what's going on. I'd encourage all listeners, if they have something extra that they can afford, to subscribe or just donate to the site, because without local news, corruption can fester, abuse can fester. It's really important because all the national sites just focus on whatever the talking heads are doing in Congress. But there are a lot of the stuff that really matters to you happens at the local level. So please support your local news, including blackwestchester.com. And for those that have stories about these narcotics officers and Mount Vernon policing, please get in touch with me. My phone number, my Instagram, my Twitter, My Facebook is all at the bottom of our articles. And many of the posts shared by Mount Vernon Youth Center and blackwestchester.com. You can also find my contact information. And for those that haven't seen those, my phone number is 929-486-4865. That's my work cell, 929-486-4865. We will continue to be investigating these corruption allegations. We have several other stories that are already in the works. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you for the job that you were doing. I just want to say, again, as an editor, I know the time it takes to follow a story like this and to continue to follow it and work months on a story before you can even put out the story. Like, everybody's trying to turn stuff out as soon as possible, you know, I mean, the dedication. So I want to applaud to anybody who has anything that they need to get in touch with him about, and you for some reason can't get in touch with him, you know how to reach us. And we'll get you the numbers. But thank you for all that you do.
Thanks all. Thank you so much.
So both Damon, so we're gonna wrap up the show, but I just want to, in last words, and if y'all want to finish addressing that part, with your
I just want to finish, man. Like, that's something, like, you know, police reform is not all, you know, we just want to beat up police. It's also looking at officers' wellness. Brother Hardy, he said that was part of the governor's executive order, when every police department in New York State by April 2021 has to submit a packet of police reform. What are they going to do in their community? So I think we have to focus on that, because we've been looking at saying, you know what, we might have to lower the retirement. Instead of 25 years, drop it down to 20 years, because these officers are leaving stressed out, you know, and a lot of them, and if you in high crime or black, some of these officers are overworked, right? So we have to look at all that, man, and I think it's very important, you know, and we don't want to get caught up in that bag saying that, you know, we're anti-cop. You know, when you're talking police reform, you're really talking and looking at all aspects, you know, and I think some of these unions will come out thanking some of these committees, the committees that's put together that's very serious about it, will be thanking them because they're looking into, you know, stuff like officer wellness.
Okay, Dr. Brown, is there any last words? Anything I didn't ask you? Anything you want to put out there? Anything that you?
Yeah, you know, I'm just going to piggyback what Damon was saying, and I think that, you know, people get the wrong idea when you talk about police reform. And you know, we want to make the profession better. We want to be able to bring the relationship of police and community together. It's been way too long, and I think that, you know, in doing that, you know, interacting here and in our professional suggestions and assertion helps in that. And I have a really interesting definition of police reform. And if you give me a second, I will just pull it up here. So go ahead. Okay. So
you got it?
Yeah, I have it. So the definition here of police reform that I have is the organizing principle of police reform is the idea that the institution of police is perfectible. The notion of perfectibility depicts police, whether good or bad today, as absolutely essential and always on a path of improvement for tomorrow. Perfectibility includes concepts such as accountability, police oversight, and professionalization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and I got a training day tomorrow, right? I got to get up in the morning and drive down to training. But one thing, my captain, Captain Bowler would tell me, when she was my sergeant at sometimes, and there were times I would get ready to whip some behind, and she will always say to me, "You are the trained professional." You are the trained professional. And she used to always say that to me. And we have to be professionals, right? We have to be professionals, and we have to carry ourselves, as professionals, and this 50A. Listen, I dare anybody to fall my folder. I've been there for 30 years. The most you're gonna see is a verbal that I pressed the wrong button on the video camera, right? I mean, that's the most you're gonna see. You ain't gonna see no abusive reports or anything like that. And I have 30 years on the job.
Maybe a lateness or two.
Well, you might see some.
No.
You might see some latenesses too, but other than that, I mean, we have to strive and we have to set the example. And it goes back to what Damon has said, back to management, that we have to set the example of professionalism, and the fact that if you go out there and act a fool, you're embarrassing me. And if you're embarrassing me, I'm going to put a foot in your behind.
Again,
That's
what parents used to tell their kids.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, that's what
Yeah.
they need to say. I don't know if they don't do it no more, but that's what my mom used to tell me.
Exactly. Behavior modification. And then when enough of them catch it, others will say, you know what? We going to do it this way. We ain't going to we ain't going to follow these guys anymore. We going to we going to get in line. And I mean, and it has to happen, man. It has to happen. But and I think that's in all of these police departments. It's just not one. That's in a lot of police departments. But when you have Black management, man, it should be easier. For us to do the right thing. It should be.
Absolutely. So we're coming to the close of the show. I just want to say, we do support the new commissioner. We're gonna, but and even with our support, we're gonna hold his feet to the fire. You know what I'm saying? But we be critical. But being critical is not being anti-cop. Like, we have to stop that. But what I want to say more importantly to the audience and to people that will watch this video, for the elected officials, especially the police commissioner, to make substantial change in that department, is going to have to do some very unpopular things that's going to piss a whole lot of people off. And if he has the technical fortitude to do that, the community needs to stand behind him, because these are the things you are asking for, and this is the thing that people are marching for. But to do that, he's going to have to step on some toes. You have to break some eggs to make a cake. You understand what I'm saying? Like, so as he gets to a point, and he hopefully will be actually implementing some of the things that he's talking about, there's going to be pushback from the systematic racism, the decades and decades of that he's, they're going to push back. They don't want change. You know what I'm saying? And they're going to come after him. And that's where I implore, because this is where we fail as a community. We don't stand by them. We ask them to do these things. And when they do it, I can speak. People come out and ask me and Damon to fight for them. And when the rocks start coming back, me and Damon will turn around and be like, well, where's the person that was fighting? It's just me and Damon. Like, what the hell happened? Like, you know what I'm saying? So the person is out there on their own. And no one wants to go through that. You understand what I'm saying? So if you ask for these things, understand your responsibility to then support them when they do it and there is pushback. I think that is the most important thing that I want to say to the community, because we always look at what the police need to do and what the elected officials need to do. For some reason, we lose the part what our responsibility is, the community, the residents, what our responsibility is in this. You know what? And I will reiterate. I will say the same thing that David has been saying for the longest. To my brothers and sisters, Black lives have to matter to Black people first.
Exactly.
Black matter for Black lives matter to anybody else. Whatever that means to you, you take that with you as my last words. You know what I'm saying? There's other people that wanted to talk about the funding of the police. That's a whole nother show. There's no way we can do that in 30 seconds or less. So I'm not ignoring your comments, but there's no way we can do that in such a short time. This has been a special edition of the Black Westchester Power Hour. I want to thank all our guests, investigative reporter George Joseph from the Gothamist and WNYC, who started this whole thing with a series of articles about the Mount Vernon police tapes. And you can find the other two shows. I'll put the link when I put this on the site. I'll put the link to the other shows if you missed it. The attorney, that was his name, Peter Davis?
Peter Davis.
Peter Davis, want to thank him. And of course, as always, Dr. Brown, Dr. David Brown. Thank you for coming on. We greatly appreciate what you bring to it.
Thank you, brother.
The people in our audience needs to hear it from more than just me and Damon. See, Damon has been talking about this for the longest, and people are just like, oh, he's just whatever. But I will say one thing, and this is about my brother Damon. If anything else, and this is for everybody listening, but everybody who's been saying he's just out there running his mouth, he's just out there making noise and all that, the movement after George Floyd should vindicate everything that Damon has been telling y'all for the last decade or so, that this was going to happen if things didn't change, and it's going to get worse. So for all y'all that was making it look like he was crazy and just an angry black man for saying all that, the world actually is starting to agree with him now. You know what I'm saying? Like the world just caught up to what he's been saying for the last, and I just want to say I appreciate that. For the people that didn't know, Journal News, LoHUD, the local newspaper, has done a feature on Black Westchester. You can read it online right now, but if you're in the Westchester area, it actually runs in the paper on Sunday. So you might want to get a copy of that if you want to see. It was a really good feature spotlight on us. I greatly appreciate Mark and LoHUD for doing that. I was honored, like I was moved, like
it was a great story. Great story.
And for all of those that left comments, and everything, that was incredible. So anyway,
Brother Damon, send me the link of your article. Send me it through text, so I could put it on the we could post it on the Black Westchester page.
Definitely, I'll send it. I'll do it now.
Okay, great, man. And thank you, brother. I appreciate you, man.
Anything you want to share? I'm sorry. Anything you want to share that you want us to run? Please. Like, we always looking for content, quality content. So
exactly.
Because I write 90% of everything, so I'm always looking for some kind of everything can't be in my voice. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, but with that, thank you for all tuning in. Again, yes, Black Lives Matter, but Black Lives must matter to Black people first. And I'm going to keep saying that.
Thank you. Peace and love to everybody.
Thank you, brother.
All right.
And that's out. And